When we think about the worst teams in NFL history, our minds automatically go toward teams with bad records, which is only natural. Two teams in the modern NFL, the 2008 Detroit Lions and the 2017 Cleveland Browns, set the standard for bad records by going 0-16. So clearly they're going to either top this list or come really close to it, right? Well, because this channel uses C-score to determine team quality and therefore aren't simple slaves to just a team's record, we can find the nuance that most so-called experts either can't find or simply won't find. As usual, a deeper explanation of how C-score works is in the description below. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank you for taking the time to click on this video. The success of this channel has far exceeded the dreams I had for it, and I have you to thank for that. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much for doing so. If by chance you haven't yet, I humbly ask that you consider doing so. Either way, you are all greatly appreciated. On with the video. In the Super Bowl era, the 2017 Cleveland Browns actually come in as the 44th worst team. Nothing to brag about for sure, but nowhere near the depths that other teams have reached. They were outscored 234 to 410, or by an average margin of just 11 points per game, which indicates there were some games that they could have won that season, just that they fell on the wrong side of things each time. Had they slipped by in one or maybe even two of those games, their overall ranking wouldn't be so dramatically different. The 2008 Detroit Lions also don't make this list, coming in at number 26. Their point differential is dramatically worse than the Browns, but they lost 4 straight one-score games among 5 overall, while also playing the league's third hardest schedule. In fact, despite going 0-16, they don't even rank out as the worst team that season. The St. Louis Rams were even more pitiful, coming in at 15th worst overall. Despite actually finding their way to 2 wins, their point differential was almost as bad while also playing a bottom 10 schedule. As we've learned from how C-score works, not all records are created equally, sometimes even within the same season. All that out of the way, it's time to reveal these poor unfortunate souls. Here are the 10 worst NFL teams from the Super Bowl era. We start things off at number 10 with the expansion Seattle Seahawks in 1976. Temporarily playing in the NFC West that season, the Seahawks found their way to 2 wins, and while they were last in the league in points allowed, they climbed up to 21st out of 28th in points scored, a respectable showing during an era where expansion teams were severely handicapped. The Seahawks did make one significant move before the season, sending an 8th round pick to the Houston Oilers for a rookie 4th round receiver by the name of Steve Largent, who to this day still has an argument as the greatest Seahawk of all time. Seattle put together a 2-2 run right in the middle of the season, sandwiched by 5-game losing streaks on either side of that. While no one else they selected in their initial draft class ever made a Pro Bowl, they still found some contributors. Under head coach Jack Patera, the Seahawks improved in each of the next 2 seasons, notching a winning record in 1978, then matching that record in 1979. For number 9, we skip ahead 10 seasons to the unfortunate product that was the 1986 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa showed life, winning in Week 3 before overtime losses in both Weeks 4 and 5. But the wheels came off shortly thereafter, ending the season 3rd from the bottom in points scored and dead last in points allowed. Tampa already had the league's worst record the season before, netting them the number 1 pick in the draft, which they summarily wasted on Bo Jackson. Not for a lack of talent on Bo's part, but for his outright refusal to play for the Bucs, given the acrimony between himself and owner Hugh Culverhouse. Indeed, Jackson never played a down for the Bucs, and they stumbled their way to yet another miserable season, seeing the release of several players in the middle of the season, and the firing of head coach Lehman Bennett at the end of it. They would go on to lose double-digit games every season through 1994, and they wouldn't post a winning record until 1997. but this team was the worst of the bunch. In their dying days of representing the city of Baltimore, the Colts put a uniquely terrible team on the field in 1981, getting our 8th spot. They opened the season with a 1-point victory at the New England Patriots. They ended it with a 2-point home victory against those same Patriots. In between was lots of losing, 14 straight games in fact. The only saving grace for this bunch was that they played the NFL's second hardest schedule. They set the NFL record for most points allowed, most yards allowed, and most yards allowed per dropback. 2 of these records still stand, which is amazing given how much the NFL has changed since 1981, particularly rules that greatly benefit offensive play. Head coach Mike McCormick got the boot after this season, and new coach Frank Kush led the way to an 0-8-1 record in the strike-shortened 1982 season. And by the time the 1984 season came around, the Baltimore Colts were no more, settling into their new home of Indianapolis, where they've been for the past 40 years. Speaking of miserable defenses, at number 7, we present the only pre-merger team on this countdown, the 1966 New York Giants. After tying their first game of the season, they proceeded to lose every game the rest of the way, except for a home game against the Washington Redskins, to go 1-12-1 while giving up 501 points. How bad is that? It's the most points per game allowed in the Super Bowl era at 35.8, and it's nearly 2/3 higher than the 1966 league average of 21.7 points per game. They also just missed setting the all-time NFL record for points allowed in a single game when they allowed 72 points against the Redskins, the same Redskins team against whom they got their only victory. And no team has given up as many points in a game since. 2-time Coach of the Year Ali Sherman led this bunch, and while they improved greatly to 7-7 the next season, it would take the G-Men another 2 decades to become proper contenders. We've hit the first post-merger season of 1970, and that season's worst team was the Boston Patriots, coming in here at number 6th. Despite a 1-0 start, they finished the season 2-14 while coming in dead last in both points scored and points allowed, getting outscored on average by more than 2 touchdowns per game while not playing an overly difficult schedule. And for them to be the worst team this season says something, as the former AFL team struggled mightily in this first season of transition. In their 5 games against teams from the original NFL, they scored 23 total points while allowing 123 points. Their division alone contained the 4-10 New York Jets and the 3-10-1 Buffalo Bills. Their head coach Clive Rush, at just 39 years old, quit mid-season due to health issues, replaced by John Mazur. This was in fact the final season they were known as the Boston Patriots, adopting the New England moniker the following season. They improved to 6-8, but then the 1972 season happened, and despite somehow winning 3 games, this team was worse than the 1970 team, and the worst the Patriots franchise has ever fielded, and they're here at number 5. They improved to 26th in scoring all the way to 24th, but they remained rooted to the bottom of the league in points allowed. This team was actually 2-1 after getting to play their first 3 games at home, yet they still carried a negative 22-point differential on account of both of those wins coming by a single point. The rest of the season saw them get waxed on a regular basis, including a 52-0 loss to the Miami Dolphins, and giving up 30-plus points in 8 of those 11 games. John Mazur was still the head coach coming into the season, but he didn't last it. General manager Upton Bell endured the same fate, with Chuck Fairbanks replacing the both of them in 1973, providing New England with a period of competitiveness, including a stellar 1976 season. The Houston Oilers were also very bad in 1972, going 1-13, a feat they repeated in an even more abject manner in 1973, coming in here at 4th place. They went winless in both their division and in their home games, stealing one win in Baltimore to avoid the goose egg. They not only allowed the most points in the league, they allowed the most points in any post-merger 14-game schedule. In fact, all of their losses this season, except for 2, were decided by multiple scores. Losing 11 games in any season isn't great, even in today's 17-game schedule. The Oilers lost that many by double digits. Their final home game drew just under 22,000 fans to the Astrodome, almost half of what they drew in their first home game of the season. Head coach Bill Peterson was gone after the 5th game, leaving him with a 1-18 overall coaching record. But his replacement, Sid Gilman, got the Oilers to 7-7 the next season before the onset of the Bum Phillips era and some pretty good football being played in Houston. The 21st century's only team to appear on this list at number 3 are the 2009 St. Louis Rams. In an era of free agency and the salary cap, it's immensely difficult for a team to fall to such depths. But by golly, the Rams did just that, winning a single game against a team that went winless the season before and mostly getting decimated in every other game they played. Against form for this list so far, the Rams were only 2nd worst in points allowed this season, but they were dead last in points scored. Only 2 other teams were even within 100 points of the Rams' negative 261 point differential, and they did all this against a bottom 10 schedule. This was on the back of 3-13 and 2-14 records, which brought in Steve Spagnuolo as head coach in 2009. The Rams jumped to 7 wins the next season before crashing right back down to 2 the next one, which saw the end of his tenure. The Rams never again had a winning record while in St. Louis, and wouldn't do so until their 2nd season back in Los Angeles in 2017, coinciding with the hiring of Sean McVay. Given the circumstances that we will explore with our number 1 entry, a case can be made that the 1991 Indianapolis Colts are truly the worst team in the Super Bowl era, but here they are at number 2. 1 win by 1 point, scoring fewer than 9 points per game, and all against a bottom 5 schedule. Those 143 points scored, worst in the league, are the 2nd fewest points scored in any 16-game season in NFL history. In fact, in the strike-shortened 9-game season of 1982, 21 out of the league's 28 teams scored at least 143 points, with the San Diego Chargers more than doubling that total. This entire season was a nightmare, costing head coach Ron Meyer his job after an 0-5 start. Ted Marchibroda took over the next season and led the team to a fluky 9-7 record before returning to form at 4-12 in '93. The 1991 Indianapolis Colts put up a level of ineptness that is unprecedented for an established franchise, and by rights, they should be the number 1 team on this list. But they're not. This team is. The expansion 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who not only went 0-14, but they did so in humiliating fashion. They didn't score a point until their 3rd game. Their closest loss on the road was by 20 points, and they even lost to their expansion brethren Seattle Seahawks at home, on the way to a league worst 125 points scored, at least 40 fewer points than anybody else. So bad was the offense that they didn't score their first touchdown of the season until the 4th quarter of the 4th game, a game they were already losing 42-10. But these Bucs had an excuse that the 1991 Colts didn't have. They were indeed an expansion team. But so too were the Seattle Seahawks, and while they did make this list, they weren't nearly as bad as the Bucs. The Bucks did have a legendary head coach in John McKay, a 4-time national champion at USC, and he knew how to keep the mood light in these darkest of football times. Under McKay, the Bucks lost the first 12 games in 1977 before winning the last 2. They bumped up to 5 wins the next season, and in 1979, they found themselves in the NFC Championship game. Looking at the entire top 10, we opened the list with a team from 1976, continued it with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and by the end we merged the two together. We didn't verbally reference these teams as C-scores during the countdown, but looking at them now, we see that the gap between first and second and 10th are very close, displaying just how bad the poor Bucks were in their first season of existence. The 09 Rams, again, are the only team here from the free agency and salary cap era where parity is much more prevalent than it was before. Only 7 of the NFL's 32 franchises are represented here, since the Colts, Patriots, and Buccaneers each secured 2 separate spots. It seems unlikely that any teams in the future will breach this list, as 2 winless teams have failed to do so. But you can never say never. Thank you so much for making it this far into the video. If you'd consider hitting that like button and sharing with some friends, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button and ding the bell for notifications on all future videos. We've got more NFL rankings videos coming around the bend. If you have any thoughts on videos that you would like to see, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Any and all thoughts are welcome, including the ones that call me dumb or otherwise. Thank you so much again, do take care, and I hope you have an awesome day.